Hi and welcome back to part 2 of the Aprilia RS125 build. If you haven't already had a chance to watch episode 1, then there'll be a link up here somewhere. You should watch that first for context. So quite a lot has happened over the last few weeks. It's definitely made me question whether or not I've done the right thing by buying this bike, but the more I get done, the more I realise, you know, I'm restoring a classic. I'm getting another really nice bike back on the road, and there aren't many of them out there these days. And I guess for anyone who's thinking about doing one of these, you have to ask yourself, you know, have you got the money to invest to do this properly? Because for every one job that you do, you find another 2 in its place, you know, whether it be little rubber seals or bits of wire or, you know, rusted bolts and stuff like that. And you can become quite obsessive. I know I have, you know, I've been looking at replacement bolts and stuff like that, and they're things I didn't think I was going to do on this build. So, you know, it can be a real money pit, you know, but at the same time, it can be a labour of love. So, yeah, we're going to head into the workshop now, and I'm going to give you an update on what's been going on in the last week. Right, so welcome back. As you can see, there's not a lot of the bike left, but for good reason. I've done quite a lot, and I'm going to talk you through all of that today, but just a bit of a rundown of what has happened so far. So starting at the front, stripped all the fairings off, took the front clock mount off, realised it was bent, as you saw in the last video. Got another one which wasn't in great condition, reconditioned that, that's going back on today. While I was doing that, I stripped the front brake assembly down, so calipers are off. I've sanded those down, got all the paint off, you'll see those later, those are being reconditioned. New slave cylinder on the top, new nice shiny OEM brake lever and clutch levers. Took the tank off, checked the plug, checked the filters, so quite happy with those. Made a small repair on the water temperature sensor there. Took both sides of the footrests off, reconditioned those, polished the frame so it looks nice and new, reconditioned the side stand and refitted that properly, so that's all good. New oil sensor, fitted that, so that's all good. Given this whole area a good clean up, stripped out all of the old conduit. I've tidied up the wiring loom, had some real issues taking the datatool alarm off. It's a bloody nightmare, you'll see in a second why, but that's all tidy, I'm happy with that. Fitted some indicators, that all works. Again, had some issues with the LED indicators and flash rates, and I'll tell you about that later on. Took all the rear end apart, so I've taken the rear wheel out, checked the cush drives, checked all the bearings and stuff like that. I'm quite happy with that. So loads of stuff to talk to you about today, so stay tuned. So I've already had the bike running a couple of times and I know it runs okay, but I wanted to check the condition of the air filter and spark plugs. So the first thing to do is to remove the tank so I can get at them. With the plastic shroud already removed in the tank, there's very little holding it on, so you need to be careful that this doesn't actually fall off. The only thing that's holding it on at this point is a hose clip. One of the first things you need to do is to disconnect the fuel. Now, the tap on my bike doesn't show which way is reserve, on and off, so it's a bit of a guesstimation. Of course, as soon as I take the hose off, the fuel comes pissing out, which was not a good start. So the next thing I'm going to do is take the airbox off to see what the condition of the filter's like, but clearly whoever put this back on has used aftermarket bolts, because some are up one way, some are up the other way, so it's another thing to add to the list to get the right fixings for this. So yeah, I'm going to take all this off now and see what we're working with underneath. Right, so let's see what this looks like, shall we? Breather on the back here somewhere, you've got to be careful of. So it's a panel filter. Doesn't look too bad, to be fair. Still got quite a bit of oil in it. There's no shit in it. I'm quite happy with that. Right, so let's pop that off. Again, the plug actually looks quite new to me. So I'm hopeful that it's going to be okay. Okay, so whilst I was quite happy with the condition of the spark plug, I discovered this little bad boy. So it was covered up, but just one very gentle touch and this thing just comes off. It's literally slid over a little lip on here, so a couple of bumps. that'll be off. So I've got to figure out what the actual connector for that should look like and sort that out. So when the water temperature sensor is actually disconnected, you get this triple L error that comes up on the dash. So turns out this is actually the right connector, but over time it's obviously worn down and lost its grip on the sensor itself. So I'm going to go ahead and snip this off and replace it with a new spade connector. It's a really simple fix. I'm going to make sure that I heat shrink it as well, just to make sure that I get a nice snug fix, no water can get in now. So simple, strip the wire off, make sure you've got the right size spade connector. This is going to be a blue connector. I'm just going to crimp this on here, check the fit, and then put some heat shrink on to make sure that it's all watertight and it looks nice and pretty. Cool, so with the heat shrink applied, I'm just going to go ahead and connect this and then just switch the bike on to make sure that the triple L error has actually gone off. It should be displaying the cold message when you turn the dash on. So I'm going to take this front subframe off. As you saw in part one, the subframe's actually bent. It's obviously been dropped at some point, and the vibration ultimately would end up cracking the screen where it had all distorted and twisted the front fairing. So we're going to take this off and replace it with a reconditioned second-hand jobby. There's 3 bolts that you need to remove first. They're nylock 12mm that you'll need to undo. One here, here, and here. You'll need to unplug some of the wiring loom and take that out of the way to take the subframe off. So do that first, but make sure you plug it all back in so you don't forget where it goes. So it's just a question of taking the nylock nuts and washers off. So the clocks are supported by these little rubber grommets in here. They probably won't fall out, but don't lose those and check them when you take them out, because the rubber grommets protect the clocks from damage of vibration through the bike. So while this is off, it's worth checking. So with the bolts removed, you can just lift the clocks out and just stick them over there for the time being. So you can see I've already undone the wiring harness. A lot of this was wrapped around the base here, so you wouldn't be able to actually take the front subframe off, so I've already done that. Right, so with all of your wiring out the way, there's countered bolts here, so 10mm on this side. There's 2 of them, one here and one, you can't really see it, it's under here at the bottom, and then there's some nylocks here. These are 12, so again they're already loosened off, so I'm going to go ahead and take those out. Just be careful, because once you take these out, the whole frame will just drop forward. You don't want to scratch any of your body work and stuff like that. Okay, so they're out. So you can see bolts. Everything on this bike is nylocked. So you can just gently pull that off. Similar to the clocks, there's some rubbers here. So again, check those, because they protect this whole subframe and this whole assembly from excess vibration through the chassis. So if they're perished, again, you might want to replace those while everything's off. It's funny, because to look at it, you wouldn't think that was bent at all, would you? In fact, if you bought that second hand, you'd probably be quite happy with it until you put it on the bike. It just goes to show how looks can be deceptive, but this is going in the bin. It's not going for resale, unless anybody's really desperate for a bent subframe. But yeah, so that's off now. We're going to replace it with a recon one later on. So this is my second-hand subframe, 20 quid on eBay, needs a paint. Got a bit of surface rust that I'm going to sand off using a bit of fine sanding paper. Don't need to get it right back, because we're going to be using some hammerite paint, which you can go straight onto rust, but I'm just taking the blisters off using a Dremel to make sure that it doesn't re-blister later on. So I've given it a bit of a dust over with a hammerite. As you can see, it's a really nice finish. It's actually a satin paint, which I really like. It's quite expensive, it's about 15 quid, but it's well worth it, and you can use it on all the black parts of your bike. So now we're just going to refit the subframe. We're going to refit all of the wiring loom and make sure that that's all okay, and then I'm going to turn the ignition on and just make sure the switches and all the rest of it work, that there's no errors kicking up on the dash. Right, so I'm going to start stripping down the brakes so that I can do a bit of a rebuild and refurb of the caliper. It looks like it's been painted with a paintbrush and it's not been done very well. And I've got new pads coming anyway, so I thought, you know, strip these down, do a bit of a rebuild. So let's just loosen off these lines. Make sure you've got something to drain the brake fluid into, because it's really nasty stuff this, and you don't really want to get that all over your workshop and your clothes. So I've just got a Coke bottle down there. It will melt through most plastics, so bear that in mind. You need to have somewhere to dispose of it fairly quickly after dismantling. Make sure you don't lose the copper fixtures. They're pretty good. Okay. So I was actually quite surprised at how little brake fluid was in there, and that's because the reservoir up here actually had a leak. So I'm going to take this opportunity while there's no brake fluid in the system to replace the cylinder at the top here and these really nasty anodized levers. So here we go. So I've removed the reservoir, but you might be able to see underneath here, obviously a little bit of paint starting to flake off where the brake fluid has leaked on it, which is a bit annoying. Yeah, this looks a bit perished. For the sake of a couple of quid, might be worth replacing it, but let's see what the one looks like on the new one that I bought. So as you can see on the standard one that I've actually bought, the pipe looks in a lot nicer condition. So I'm going to go ahead and fit this. We're not going to bleed the brakes until later on, once we've reconditioned the caliper and stuff like that. So let's put this on. So fitting levers is relatively straightforward. It's literally just undoing this. It's countered underneath. One thing you have got to pay attention to when you're refitting is this plunger, okay? So you can adjust how deep that goes. Now if that's too deep, it'll be pushing fluid into the cylinder and down into the caliper all the time. If it's too shallow, well, when you grab a handful of brake, not a lot's going to happen. So there are lots of different ways that you can remove caliper paint, and none of them are particularly easy. This is a generic paint stripper that you can get from anywhere, like B&Q, applied in 2 different waves, and it starts to dissolve the paint. Now I'd removed most of the paint already by hand using a heat gun and various wire brushes and bits of Dremel tool and all the rest of it. Nothing is quite as effective as this stuff. So many hours later, this is the end result, ready to be painted. One more simple job was changing the oil sensor. Now I just jumped onto the forums and just found someone who was breaking a bike and bought a relatively decent one. As you can see, there's some what can only be described as mastic on this one, and when I eventually pulled the mastic off, I could see why the wiring was all spliced and cut. So it's a good job that I replaced it. So today is the day that all of this red nasty conduit is coming off, and I'm really happy to see this go because it's absolutely minging. So here we go. Now we're taking the conduit off, I can see what a mess the wiring loom is. there's lots of splices and lots of black tape and all the rest of it. So I'm going to put some proper joins on all this stuff and heat seal it all and just tidy this loom up. And while I'm at it, I'm going to trace all the wires back for the datatool alarm and get rid of that. So removing the alarm actually wasn't too difficult. If you trace all of the wires to the point of origin, clip them, and then rebond and reseal all the wires, you won't have an issue. So I managed to strip all that out and tidy all the wiring loom up, as you can see. The next thing that I came across was a problem with the indicator circuit. So I'd installed LED indicators, and of course they all stayed on. So what I didn't realise about the Aprilia is that all of the indicators have to be wired in, and if they're LED they will need flash relays. So I've installed the flash relays, and then I realised that there wasn't an earth running through the appropriate circuit. So I had to find a wiring diagram, which is in the description below if you need it, to be able to build an earth into the system. God knows why it had been taken out, but it had, and finally I got it all to work, so great. Okay, so we're going to remove the right hand foot peg. So this is the rear brake, and then obviously the rear brake master cylinder and heel plates. There's a couple of reasons why I want to take this off. One, I want to give it a good clean. I want to strip it down, make sure it's all okay, and rebuild it. Two, I want to remove these quite nasty carbon look heel plates, and I want to replace all this conduit, so it's got to come off. So it's a 6mm Allen key bolt here and here. Again, these, like everything else, seem to be countered on the back by nylock-in bolts, so you're going to need a 13mm ring spanner for that. So you're going to need to take those off. Already done, they're already hand tight, so we can just slip that off, take those out. Okay, so next challenge I come across when removing this was these two bolts. Okay, so they're 10mm, but on the back, like everything, they've got countered nylock bolts, so those are 12s, which is fine, but they've got this washer that should be recessed on this side into the heel plate. Well, whoever put this bike back together put them on the inside in here. So what's happening is these nylock-in nuts are actually boring into the heel plate. So initially I couldn't get a spanner on this side to be able to undo them. So because they're so close to the size of the actual hole, I was able to just pull them off the back. But in doing so, oh, can you believe it, I accidentally split this carbon look heel plate, which is really unfortunate because I like them so much. Luckily for me, I'll just put this one back on there so you can see. Luckily for me, let's just take it off. These are just covers, so the actual heel plate is underneath here. And is in relatively good condition, so I'm going to recon those and use those. These are going in the bin. So once you've done that, you will be able to disconnect remove this dust seal, take the plunger out. That's going to need cleaning. This rubber seal is perished, that's probably going to need replacing as well. We take this master cylinder off. There you go, so that's one footrest removed. We can do the other side. So similar to the other side, two 6mm countered Allen key bolts. It's 13 on the back and 6mm on the front. In order to take this rear set off, you've got to disconnect it here. Now, one thing that surprised me when I was taking this off, I'll show you, is that just literally fell off. Now that's not supposed to happen. There's a couple of ways that you should be able to disconnect this. There's a bolt on the back here, which you can undo and take this off, or you can undo it here and slide this off. So that ain't good. That almost certainly means that something's damaged and needs replacing. So I don't know if you'll be able to see this. So in here, you just see that? There's a little clip in there that should prevent that ball joint from slipping off. Now if that's worn and decayed, then obviously that is going to need replacing. So, and actually if you look at the selector itself, it looks like it's kind of at the end of its life. So actually, you know, I'm probably going to have to order a few of these bits online and replace them when I do the rebuild. but at least I'm finding out now and not later on when I go to try and ride the bike. So last job for the week was polishing and restoring the footrest. Now I had to take them all apart, give them a good polish, give them a good clean. There's some parts that I'm going to have to order in order to be able to put these together properly, but as you can see, they're looking a lot better already. There's a few bits on this that unfortunately are too worn to be able to salvage. So the other thing that I've been doing, as you can see, is polishing the frame. So I've got some cutting compound and some proper polish. And I've just been giving it a proper once over to make it look nice and clean and tidy when it's all reassembled. So I'm going to leave you with that for now. I'm going to be back with part 3 in the next week or so. Loads of exciting bits to do, caliper rebuild and stuff like that. So if you like what you see, subscribe and leave your comments in the description below. Take care, speak soon.